If you're passionate about classical education and you're looking for the next step, Hillsdale College's Diana Davis Spencer Graduate School of Classical Education is now offering 2 master's degree programs. These programs provide students with a broad philosophical, historical, literary, and pedagogical perspective on classical education. The Master of Arts in Classical Education is a 2-year, in-person program on Hillsdale's campus in Michigan, while the Master of Classical Education Leadership is a 3-year hybrid program with a 1-week summer class held at Hillsdale College. Whether you're interested in teaching, administration, or another area within the field of classical education, we're prepared to offer you a foundational, time-proven approach to your studies. We want to see your application soon. Applications must be submitted on or before December 15th, 2024 for full consideration. To learn more and submit your application, visit classicalgrad.hillsdale.edu. That's classicalgrad.hillsdale.edu.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. We're joined by Emily Williams. She's a science teacher at Kootenai Classical Academy in Post Falls, Idaho. Previously spent time at Treasure Valley Classical Academy in Fruitland, Idaho. Emily, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott. Talking
today about an overview of science in a Hillsdale K-12 school. Before we begin there, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Idaho, I guess, since you're deciding to stay there.
Yeah, sure thing. So I just finished my 18th year teaching. For the first 15 years of my career, I was in the public school system in New York City. And the obvious appeal of teaching at a classical school moved me all the way across the country to teach at Treasure Valley in Fruitland, Idaho. And I guess just because the winters aren't cold enough in southern Idaho, I decided to move north to teach at Kootenai Classical Academy for the upcoming school year.
All right, talking science, how does science at large fit into the overall goal of Hillsdale K-12 schools?
So I think something that is really beautiful about what all of the teachers in Hillsdale schools are trying to do in our classrooms is we're really trying to draw out of students these universal qualities that all humans share. That I think are largely kind of ignored or glossed over in a lot of approaches to education. So really what I mean by that is we're really trying to teach with wonder and pull that natural curiosity and that wonder about the natural world out of students in the science classroom, much like the teachers in our humanity classes are trying to pull out really the true essences of what is objectively good and true and beautiful in literature and about kind of just that non-physical aspect of human existence. And I think this is really powerful. You know, coming from the public school sector, the why of what we were doing in our classrooms didn't really strike at the heart of what it means to be a human. And so they're largely ineffective in really giving students a good reason for engaging in the learning. Whereas in our classes and in our classical schools, we're really focused on things that are truly meaningful to all humans across generations and that are objectively worth pursuing. And in the science classroom, what that looks like is we are very content-based. Mm-hmm. So we really want to make sure that students are cultivating their intellect and their minds through the study of what we currently know to be true about the natural physical world. And I think that is a really important part of human existence. And in many schools, it's the only way that we can come to the truths about our existence is through a scientific experiment. But I think in our approach in our schools, it's a big part of it, but it certainly isn't the whole story. So really how the science kind of approach in our classical schools fits into the kind of larger overall mission of improving the hearts and minds is we're really trying to train their minds around this very rich curricula that we teach our students, but also imbue in them an appreciation and a beauty for the natural world.
How do those goals for science students at a Hillsdale school, how might they be different from what they are in other schools?
Yes. So I think in other schools, and I'm just going to kind of go off my experience in the New York City public school system, they're much more kind of number oriented. So if I'm thinking about, the goal at Treasure Valley Classical Academy is to train the minds and improve the hearts. So we kind of think of different ways of how we're going to explain to students and show them and kind of guide them in that direction. And I think about goals in my other schools, and it was, to increase the passing rate on the state test by 5 percentage points. Or it was, I had one school where the goal was for like 99% of the students to go to college. And I'm not saying that any of these things are inherently negative, but they don't really instill a sense of true meaning and purpose in our students. And I think that's the big tangible difference is that there's a lot of joy and hope in a school like our classical schools when you are daily focused on something that is truly meaningful to humans versus chasing a percentage rate on a test or trying to explain to students that, the reason we learn is for economic utility. Those are woefully kind of ill-suited to giving students the answer that they are looking for when they ask why we're learning something.
Is there a method to the madness when it comes to how and when our students are introduced to concepts in science? Does it matter when they are learning these things?
No. And I think that something that is so beautiful about the curriculum in Hillsdale schools is from kindergarten. Students are expected to know a lot about the physical natural world. And maybe to your previous question, that's another difference is when you look at the science standards, most schools across the country now are using the next generation science standards. And when you actually read them, they don't really expect a lot of students, nor are they really based in kind of a rigorous examination of the physical world. There's a lot that's left out. And I'm of the opinion, and I've seen it in students in my school as young as, kindergarten and first grade, that students can understand and think about and express an understanding and appreciate the beauty of pretty complicated stuff at a very early age. And so I think it's really important that we kind of hold that high standards for students and really understand that they can achieve them.
Does it fit in with the natural curiosity of younger students about the world around them?
Oh, gosh, yes. And that's like one of my favorite things to do. I teach upper school, but they still kind of sometimes become almost very childlike when we're really kind of having an incredible conversation about the beauty of a process in our cells, and we're really delving into just these incredible processes that just happen and we don't even know it. And then someone will say something in class, and the whole class is just like, "Whoa, that's amazing." And you also see it. One thing that I think is really important about our curriculum is we tell the biographies of scientists to really help students understand the historical context of what we're learning. And even in my upper school, in my 8th and 9th grade classes, I turn it into what I call story time. And so we really, I tell them the story like I would, even small children, and they just adore it. Because I think whether you're in first grade or whether you're in 12th grade, this love, this capability, this ability to love and appreciate what is truly good and beautiful is universal.
You mentioned earlier, and we talk a lot about teaching with wonder, instilling the feeling of wonder in the students. Is that still possible the older those students get in science, your upper school students, your 8th and 9th graders?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's all in how we go about teaching this new information. It's incredible to me, the amount of people I talk to just as an adult, and they find out that I'm a science teacher and they're like, ugh, I hated science. And I am like, what? How can you hate science? And to me, it kind of speaks to really a method of teaching and maybe kind of just not really a focus on exactly what you said, this really pulling that curiosity and wonder out of students. And not only is it possible in the upper school, but you can really hit it when talking about really high level concepts. And, when we finished going over the light dependent reactions of photosynthesis, which is very complicated and lots of different molecules. And after we were done, the students were like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. And that's, just kind of exemplifies the importance of keeping wonder in mind and believing that is in all of our students, and really teaching with that desire to pull out that wonder in mind.
Talking with Emily Williams. She's now a science teacher at Kootenai Classical Academy in Post Falls, Idaho. How do you integrate experiments, hands-on activities? Where does that have a role in the Hillsdale K-12 school science programs?
Yes. So, when we talk about the history of science and kind of these great discoveries, something that we always do is we talk about the importance of well-designed experiments. So not only do students come away with an understanding of really, what has to be a part of an experiment to give us results that then we can draw some type of valid conclusion from, but also the important role of experimentation in science. So the labs that I do are really focused around kind of an examination of the methods that we're using to solve the problem, and how I often include students in the process of the design of the experiment, so that we can kind of, look at what it is that we're trying to figure out, and look at how we can create, or manipulate reality to kind of isolate the thing that it is that we're looking for. So I'm not really kind of like super focused on them, using all of this like crazy equipment, because to me, the beauty of, you can always learn how to do that later, because to me, the beauty of trying to figure out what the natural world is all about is in the design of those experiments. And so I want them to be able to do that, to be fluent in kind of that language of science, and also be critical to it. It allows them to then hear about other experiments and to evaluate the validity of the results.
What does a classical science classroom look like?
Oh, man, there is so much fun stuff going on in there. So typically, I'll just kind of like go through my day. When students come in, I'll have like some type of warm up on the board. And I always try to make my warm ups very engaging and, trying to hit one of these higher levels of science. And then we'll move into kind of, whatever it is that I'm teaching them. And something that I didn't fully understand when I started teaching at a classical school was we are very explicitly teacher-led. And I think that can often be interpreted as teacher in the front of the room talking about the content and kind of just lecturing the students. But really what it looks like in a classical classroom, it's a conversation you're having with the students. You're not giving the students the information on a platter. You are giving them something to kind of put their teeth into, and then you're asking them questions to try to lead them to the truth that you want them to learn for that day. And it's beautiful. So it looks like students, being called on often when they don't want to be, but knowing that, their contributions to class will eventually lead us to what it is we're looking for. And it's really amazing. It kind of ties into what we were talking about with this kind of sense of wonder that we're trying to pull out of our students is, I could just tell students the light-dependent reactions of photosynthesis. Here they are, and then, answer these questions about it. Or we could go through this whole thing where we are telling the story and answering questions. And then when we finally get to that learning, it's just so much more meaningful, and students have played a much more active role. And so they own that learning much more.
Are there particular areas in the science curriculum along the way that tend to really attract students? Students are attracted to those areas of the curriculum in the sciences.
Yes. So traditionally, in biology, the anatomy and the dissections, I guess students either love them or hate them. Most students really are looking forward to the dissections. But just kind of that study of anatomy and really anything that's like directly related to kind of our experience. So kind of body systems, the immune system, things like that. But something that actually surprised me is my first year when I was teaching at Treasure Valley, I taught conceptual physics, and I had never in my career taught physics. And my experience personally with physics was that I didn't like it and that it was kind of boring. And so I was like, man, this is going to be hard to, it's like easy to make biology like very accessible to students, but I was kind of worried about that. But they love that class. And when we are just talking about just the most simple thing about why objects move, what are these things that they govern? There are these laws of motion that govern our every interaction and our every action, and everything we do is governed by these laws of motion. And students really relate to that in a way that I wasn't expecting. So, so sometimes, there are these things that are going to be a hit with the students, but then students are always surprising us.
Emily Williams is a science teacher at Kootenai Classical Academy in Post Falls, Idaho. Previously spent time at Treasure Valley Classical Academy in Fruitland, Idaho. As we talk today about an overview of science at a Hillsdale K-12 school. Emily, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K-12. That's Hillsdale_K-12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.